Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokies fans? Game week is finally upon us as we hit the road for Nashville, and Virginia Tech kicks off the 2024 season against Vanderbilt. It's episode 370 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on this beautiful Wednesday, August 28th, 2024 from our high-tech studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Hey, remember to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. As always, the first month of your subscription is free, and your student subscription is free as well. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. The TSL podcast is also sponsored by the Hokie Way, whose Countdown to Kickoff campaign is underway all this month. This is a huge campaign for the Hokie Way that generated over $500,000 in NIL funds last year. And as of this morning, 171 Tech Sideline donors have contributed over $43,000. We'll be featuring updates on the campaign all month, so check out Tech Sideline to find out how you can get involved and how you can donate. We'll also drop the link in the YouTube description. Check that out down there as well. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. To my right, Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist. Across the way, Andy Bitter, our senior staff writer. And in the fourth chair today, our founder and general manager. Back on the pod, Will Stewart. Nick Brown is behind the scenes, the mustache man, always producing the show. Well, to set the table for everybody, just in case they're living under a rock, Virginia Tech does start the 2024 football season this weekend. Saturday, on the road in Nashville at Vanderbilt, First Bank Stadium, 12 p.m. Eastern time kick. If you're heading down there, it's an 11 a.m. local time kick, and the Hokies open up as 13-point favorites.
Yeah, it's been a fast offseason, I think.
Has it?
For me, it has.
I don't know.
For me, it's going by pretty fast.
Okay.
I don't know why that is. It just is. I think it's been a boring preseason, and we talked about before the season. Like, unless there are injuries or something, it's going to be a pretty boring preseason because pretty much all these starting spots were already taken. I mean, you've got a few spots here and there that were up for grabs, but for the most part, nothing happened in Virginia Tech's preseason, and that's a good thing. I think it's the healthiest they've ever gone into a season opener. You've got one guy in the two deep that might not play, and that's Gallo. Other than that, they're pretty much 100%. So I feel like they're in a really good place going in the opener.
Yeah, I think Takai Heath was working off on the side with Gala doing some running, so I'm not sure exactly his status. We'll see that later today. We're recording this on a Wednesday. Normally you have like a quarterback battle or something that is like the featured piece of August, and even if it's just sort of nominally a quarterback battle, it's something like, all right, wait until they announce it. But this one is like, as soon as the season's done, it's like Drones is the quarterback, and everybody else is coming back. So when the big story with the depth chart reveal yesterday was who was the left guard and who was the starting safety that Pry basically said was the starting safety last week. So, I would say no drama is probably a good thing because it does mean that they have so many, questions answered about this roster. Now I think the big question is, are they legit? Can they go out there and actually, do what everybody thinks they're capable of doing? And, I can't wait to find out. I'm finally glad the games are back at last.
Will, how you feeling over there? Heading into now, you've had a ton of Virginia Tech football seasons under your belt. Heading into 2024, when's the last time you felt this excited about a team?
I would say 2012, although 2012 was not warranted.
I think Gio just called you old, by the way. A lot of seasons under your belt.
You got to own it, man.
Seasoned.
Tech Sideline, founded in 1996.
It's cool. I look good for my age. I don't mind. No, I'm excited. I'm a little guarded, because probably because I watched the Florida State Virginia Tech game about a week ago, and that reminded me to stay humble. Looking forward to it. Going down to Nashville with a group of about 15 people. It's going to be hot as blazes down there, so we're stocking up on water and getting ready to roll.
Water, anything else as well? Part of the tailgate?
Why no, Gio?
Why do you ask?
We're going to buy good breakfast food, but other than that, it's just water.
There we go. All right, well, Virginia Tech leads the all-time series 6-3 and has won the last 5 in a row, 1983, 84, 85, 86, and 89. They have not played since 1989. The last loss that Virginia Tech had at the hands of Vanderbilt was in 1982, and Virginia Tech is 2-3 in games when playing on the road down just off of Broadway. So talking about the Vanderbilt Commodores a little bit, let's bring everybody back to what they did last season, especially because it's a season opener. They went 2-10. They lost their 10 games. We could cue up the clip of Chris saying that they're not very good at football. Their lone 2 wins were over Hawaii and Alabama A&M to start the season. They lost every SEC game by double digits, and I mean, bullet point after bullet point, it just gets worse.
They, let's see, every SEC game. Actually, their last 10 games of the season, I believe they gave up 31 plus points per game, something like that. Like UNLV dropped 40 on them. Awful defensive team last year, not much better offensively. What they've done in the offseason is they've totally revamped their coaching staff. They brought in Jerry Kill, as Virginia Tech fans will remember, as like a special advisor to the head coach. They also brought his offensive staff in from New Mexico State. Tim Beck, who was a longtime Division II coach at Pittsburgh State, I believe. And
won some national titles, didn't he?
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah, so he's a good football mind. And they turned around New Mexico State's offense. Now, it took them a year. They were not good their first year. They were good in their second year. When they got their quarterback, Diego Pavia, who was also transferred to Vanderbilt. That's the solution if you're a struggling SEC team. Just raid New Mexico State of all their players and coaches, apparently. But, he did kind of the same thing on the defensive side of the ball. He's taken over play calling. Clark Lee, their head coach, excuse me. When I say he, that's who I'm talking about. He's taken over play calling. He's a former defensive coordinator at Notre Dame who's a Vandy graduate. He's made some changes, brought in a new assistant defensive line coach to try to get their pass rush better, changed out their safeties coach, changed out their cornerbacks coach. So major coaching changes on both sides of the ball for Vanderbilt, because this was a program in his first year that went 2-10. Then they improved to 5-7 in his second year, and people thought they were making progress. And then bam, last year they were bad. I mean, they weren't just bad last year. Like
abysmal.
Right. You go 0-8 and you can still be like somewhat competitive, but they weren't competitive in any of those games.
They had in that 2022 season that they went 5-7, 2-6 in conference, back-to-back SEC wins over Florida and Kentucky, and they actually blew out Kentucky. And it's just they almost felt like they were going to move in the right direction last year. Kind of did the opposite.
This is such a tough place to win. Just it doesn't have like the football culture and the resources that all of its SEC counterparts have. And I'm looking at their history here. I don't think they've won 10 games in a season before. Really, the highlight of it, the peak of it, was under James Frankel. And Brent Pry was there as a defensive coordinator, and they win 6 games, 9 games, 9 games when he's there. Go to 3 bowl games. That's incredible at Vanderbilt. And now it's been on tough times. You feel like Clark Lee changing up the coordinators, taking over defensive play calling. You feel like this is sort of do or die at this point with him. He's in his 4th year. Yeah, 4th year here, 2-10, 5-7, 2-10. I don't know if there's a lot of momentum to make another coaching change at Vanderbilt if there's not progress this season. I don't know what their financial situation is. I know they just paid a lot to Jerry Stackhouse not to be the basketball coach. If there's more there to dip into that money, but sometimes you just need to change it up at the top. And I feel like this season very much when you change both sides, who's calling the plays on both sides, I think that's a pretty big deal.
Just to kind of back up your point a little bit more here, Andy, they have not had 2 winning seasons in SEC, or they've only had 2 winning seasons in SEC play since 1959. They haven't had a winning season in the last 10 years. Just 3 winning seasons since 1982. Only 9 all-time bowl appearances and 4 9-win campaigns. 2 of them did come under James Franklin. So I kind of want to take it to that spot, right? A return to Nashville for both Brent Pry and Chris Marv. Brent Pry was on staff from 2011 to 2013 under James Franklin before they made the move to Penn State. Pry was the co-defensive coordinator and linebacker coach in 2011 when he coached Chris Marv, second team All-SEC that season. They finished 6-6. In 2012, Pry coached the defense to 2 23-plus point wins in SEC play over Kentucky and Tennessee. They had a 9-win season, went 5-3 in conference. They won their last 7 games of the year and finished in the AP Top 25. And then in 2013, maybe their best year, again finished in the AP Top 25, won 9 games, beat a Top 25 Georgia team, beat Florida on the road, beat Tennessee on the road, and Brent Pry was a big part of that. His 3 years down there.
Historically, whenever Vanderbilt has been competent, they've done it with a strong defense. And when I say competent, like I'm talking, 5 wins, 6 wins, something like that. Like there have been times where Vanderbilt has put a really good defense on the field, but their offense has been bad. Like you never see a good Vanderbilt team that outscores people 38-35 every week.
Jay Cutler back in the day.
They did have
put up
Jay
some
Cutler.
points in those games.
Yeah. They put up a few. But like this Vanderbilt defense is not like those past Vanderbilt defenses. It finished outside the top 100 in pretty much every major statistical category last year, and a lot of those guys are back. And the portal guys they brought in, outside of Zaylen Wood, they just don't seem like big impact guys to me. So it looks like it's going to be a struggle for them again this year on paper. Now we know very well what coaching changes can do for a program, and scheme changes and things like that. Like Virginia Tech fans should know that very well. They saw a scheme tweak in the middle of last season that jump-started things. And they saw the same thing in 2019 after the first 4 games of the season when they switched to the smoke and mirrors type offense.
Jerry Kill inspired.
So you can sit here and say they're going to be bad. The bottom line is we don't know that they are, but if you're betting in Vegas, historically Vanderbilt is not going to be a good football team.
Fair. And then just to piggyback, Chris Marv as well, played linebacker from 2007 to 2011, 2008, freshman All-American, 3-time second team All-SEC linebacker in 2009, 10, and 11. Begins his coaching career there as the defensive quality control guy, then was a graduate assistant before he then ended up becoming the inside linebackers coach in Mississippi State, Florida State. Here he is at Virginia Tech. But for Pry and Marv, especially because that connection where Pry coached Marv, does this have a little bit of extra juice? Maybe for Marv more so as an alumnus, but does this mean a little bit something to them?
Probably means more to Marv, I would guess, because he is an alum. For Brent Pry, it was just a stop.
Right.
It was wherever it was there, and then wherever James Franklin was going next. That was where Pry was going to be. So I expect it'll mean something to Marv. I mean, he's going to be down there calling plays on the field that he used to play on. Now, that being said, once you get out there in the game, it's going to be out of your mind for the most part, I think. But yeah, I think it probably means a little bit to go back and coach at your alma mater.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Even though I'm sure we talked to him today after practice, he'll probably downplay it a little bit because I think it's going to give the typical coach speak. It was a special place when I was there, but I'm focused on Virginia Tech now and winning this thing. I actually covered Marv in one game when he was down there when I was covering Auburn, and Auburn played there in 2008. And Vanderbilt beat them 14-13. Came back from a 13-0 deficit to win that game. And that was the last straw for Tommy Tuberville with Tony Franklin as the offensive coordinator. He fired him in the middle of the next week. And all hell broke loose at Auburn. And now Tommy Tuberville is a U.S. Senator. So it might have been all directly related to that game and that season that we're in the situation that we are now. So.
That is so wild.
Sliding doors situation.
Let's talk a little bit about this Vanderbilt offense. Averaged just 319 yards and 23 points a game last year. Even that's a little bit misleading because almost all that production came against Hawaii, Alabama, A&M, and then they had a little bit of a shootout with UNLV week 3. They ended up losing that game.
Yeah, statistically they were pretty decent those first couple games, and then after that it was all downhill. I mean, when you lose 10 games in a row like that, your stats are not going to be good. And some of that, is the level of competition. The SEC is a tough league. We have to say that, and their schedule, I think, was one of the tougher ones in the SEC. But I also want to respond to a comment in our buy or sell article yesterday where somebody said, you have to think that 2-10 in the SEC is probably the same as 6-6 or 7-5 in the ACC. And I'm like, except for the fact that 3-9 Wake Forest crushed them last year.
Yeah, it was 36-20
Sure, right.
on the road, but still, it wasn't exactly a close game.
Right, and Wake Forest couldn't do that to anybody last year. I mean, that Mitch Griffiths is their quarterback, for goodness sake.
Poor Mitch taking a stray.
Yeah.
Taking another look, 5 projected offensive starters or transfers. 10 of the 22-man two deep are transfers for this offense as well. You mentioned Chris Tim Beck, he comes in, but New Mexico State was pretty good. I mean, he had a rolling offense there, and he had a really, really good quarterback, Conference USA Player of the Year in Diego Pavia. He brings him with him. Can they get something going?
They beat Auburn last year.
They beat down
in the Plains.
Auburn.
Yes.
I mean, it's 31-10.
Yeah.
They crushed them.
In the Plains, yeah.
So, I think Pavia is a very capable player. Especially you look at him in that game against Auburn. I think they use him well. I think he's one of those quarterbacks that if you ask him to do traditional things, he wouldn't be as good. But I think they know how to use him. I think they're going to try to spread Tech out, create a lot of one-on-one matchups, and give him running lanes because he's a good scrambler. And, he's not the biggest guy in the world, 6 foot, 207 pounds, but he's kind of stout. And he held up last year. He was one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country in terms of number of carries. So he was right up there. Him and Kyron Jones were very similar in the number of carries they had last season. So I think he's very, very capable. It's the players around him that I would have serious question marks about.
Yeah, I think that offensive line specifically, I know they're kind of mixing and matching and still trying to figure that out right now, so I don't know what kind of protection he has, but I feel like Pavia is a warrior. Like, he's going to go out there, he's going to play. Coming from New Mexico State, I screwed that up yesterday. I tweeted New Mexico during the press conference. An abhorrent mistake on my part. I apologize for that. So New Mexico State is where he came from, and that was a really good offense. Just they had, I think, a lot of option elements and things that allowed them to run the ball pretty well. And, that's if you're outmatched physically, which could be the case going up against Virginia Tech's defensive line, I think that's what you want to do, is try to create confusion, misdirection. And, Pavia, I think, is the perfect guy to try to run that. I just don't know if they have the offensive line in front of it to really pull it off.
Yeah, I think watching the Florida State-Georgia Tech game last week, you heard Jesse Palmer use the phrase eye candy when talking about the Georgia Tech offensive scheme. And that's another way, like I call it smoke and mirrors, he calls it eye candy. It's the same thing.
Sure.
It's a lot of motion, a lot of deception, things like that. So you're going to see some of that stuff from Vanderbilt this week for sure.
Tim Beck and Diego Pavia, they were a big part of one of the best turnarounds in FBS over the last couple of seasons. Back-to-back bowl berths after inheriting a team that had only just one 3-win season since 2010. So a huge turnaround there. They get the big win over Auburn. Pavia, he was among the top 25 in the country in passing touchdowns and passing efficiency. They also added another quarterback out of the portal, and he was actually a 4-star transfer, Nate Johnson. Another option for them. It appears they're going to go with Pavia. He's the starter, but you had a 4-star transfer. I mean, that's something to have.
Yeah, and Johnson's got another year of eligibility left, so he could conceivably take over next season. They actually added 3 quarterback transfers because their 4th-string guy is also a New Mexico State transfer.
Yeah.
I hope New Mexico State got compensated for all these losses. Of course, they did not.
Yeah.
But,
we'll get into it because they took some more guys.
They took some more
Their
guys.
From the
4th-string guy,
Lobos.
are you talking about Blaze Berlowitz?
I am talking about
That's a
Blaze
great name.
Berlowitz. It is a
I love
great
that
name.
name.
Yep.
Started a road to glory with that.
Yeah,
Andy.
like any name, any first name that's Blaze,
Blaze.
like whatever the last name is, just gravy after that. But then the alliteration on top of that, fantastic name.
Yep.
One of the other guys that they took from New Mexico State was Eli Stowers, who could be a huge target for Pavia. Transferred from New Mexico State after a season at Texas A&M. He's now at Vanderbilt. 32 catches for 346 yards, 2 tuds last year. He also, his stat line's kind of crazy. 29 carries. He's listed as a tight end for 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also went 4 for 8 passing with 99 yards and a touchdown, a long of 69. So some trick plays could be in the cards.
He is what Virginia Tech hoped Connor Blumrick would turn into. He started his career. Eli Stowers started his career as a quarterback, like Blumrick, didn't make it. So they moved him to tight end. becomes a good pass catcher. Now he's the Bucky Hodges type of tight end, 300 or so snaps last year, and like 2/3 of them were in the slot, and very few of them were actually with his hand in the dirt. But he's a good pass catcher. Really bad at blocking. So generally speaking, they would avoid having him on the field when he had to block. So that might be a tip-off. If he's in the game, it's probably at least a 2/3% chance that it's going to be a pass. They're going to pass. Yeah,
or RPO.
That's the way it was at New Mexico State.
Sure. Well, their top 3 receivers transferred out for Vanderbilt after the 2-10 season. Will Shepard transferred to Colorado. London Humphreys transferred to Georgia. That's kind of a crazy jump, Vanderbilt to Georgia. And then Jaden McGowan transferred into the ACC at Boston College. So you lose your top 3 receivers. They do bring back Junior Sherrill and Quincy Skinner. They're still around. They were the 4th and 5th receivers last season. Sherrill ended up having 20 catches, 293 yards, 3 touchdowns. Skinner, 20 receptions, 204 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Those are going to kind of be their go-to guys. They also added some receivers out of the transfer portal.
I think 6 of their top 9 receivers are either freshmen or transfer. So a ton of turnover in that room. We'll see how Junior Sherrill does. He's probably maybe their top returning guy. Richie Hoskins is technically their starter, I believe, probably in the slot. But he's a guy who started his career at Middlebury College and has 6 career catches.
Right.
It's just doesn't seem to be that talented of a group. Loic Fungi, and yes, I'm using the pronunciation guide.
Texas Tech.
From Texas Tech. He's probably their most productive receiver over the course of a career. I think one year at Texas Tech, he caught 30, 35 passes or something like that. But just on paper, it's not a group of wide receivers that stand out. They're going to have to – I don't think these guys are going to be able to, get separation against Dorian Strong and Mansour Delane. I think you're going to have to – the Vanderbilt coaching staff is going to have to come up with creative ways to scheme them open.
Besides Fungi, they added Jeremiah Dillon from Ole Miss and Darren Wiley from the University of Louisiana Monroe. So that's kind of what their receiver room is looking like. Andy, you had mentioned the offensive line, and one big focus for them was trying to bolster that offensive line in the transfer portal. They ended up adding Stephen Losoya as a center from Mississippi State and Stephen Hubbard, a guard from UTEP. The left side of the offensive line, though, does have some returning veterans.
Yeah, I think they was looking for help up front. I mean, they did not run the ball well at all last year. I'm looking at this, ranked 124th in the country. There's only a few Power 5 schools that were worse than that: Colorado, South Carolina, Washington State, Michigan State. So they're right there near the bottom. I think that's the primary reason why you bring in somebody like Jerry Kill and the OC and this quarterback who can run it is you've got to have some semblance of a ground game. You can't just go out there, especially in the SEC, you can't just go out there and try to win shootouts against some of these offenses down there. You have to somewhat try to control the clock and have something that keeps defenses honest. So, they brought in a lot of new guys. I don't know how settled that group is right now. We'll see. But I think that's still going to be a work in progress as they go through this opener.
Yeah, Losoya at center. Kind of a replacement level player, I would say. This is his 3rd school. Middle Tennessee, Mississippi State. He's always been average.
Sure.
And they brought in Stephen Hubbard from UTEP, who played pretty well at UTEP, but he's a backup here, listed on the depth chart. Now I'm sure he'll get into the game. What's interesting is they designate their players. They don't do left tackle, left guard, they do quick tackle, quick guard, and strong tackle. Now I don't know if they're just being cute or if they're actually they're going to line these guys up in different spots based on the play they're running and the side of the field or whatever. But no matter how you slice it, it was not a productive group for them last year. Of these 5 starters, either at Vanderbilt or transferring in from somewhere else, 3 of their 5 starters graded out below 50 in pass blocking. That's awful.
Yeah.
As a comparison, the much maligned Parker Clements was a 69 in pass blocking last year, which is a above average number. So it just hasn't been a productive group. Now, that being said, we saw what happened with Virginia Tech's offensive line last year when there was a scheme change and you added more eye candy and smoke and mirrors and things like that, and you made it easier on the offensive linemen. It doesn't require dominant blocking up front to run an offense like that if you know what you're doing as a coach and you've got the right quarterback. And I suspect that's what you're going to see Vanderbilt try to do. But on paper, this is the biggest mismatch of the game, in my opinion, this Vanderbilt offensive line going up against guys like Aeneas Peebles and Antoine Powell-Brown.
Last thing on the offense here, and we're gonna kind of get into, we're gonna go offense, we're gonna go defense, then we're gonna have a discussion about this matchup and kind of where Virginia Tech can exploit some things and stuff like that. But they do return their leading rusher. This kind of stunned me. Cedric Alexander had 96 carries for 371 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he was their leading rusher. He also caught 18 passes for 133 yards and no scores. That was one of their most productive offensive players, and that looks like a third-string running back's stat line. 3
of their 4 running backs have averaged under 4 yards per carry for their career. The one guy who has averaged over 4 only has 20 career carries. So there's just not a lot of sample size there. It just, again, it appears this offense, except for Pavia, lacks playmakers across the board. They lack playmakers, and they don't appear to be able to block. I mean, that's just what it looks like on paper. Again, the offensive coaching staff can have a certain degree of change as far as that goes, but it would have to be I don't know. You just don't see a lot of talent there.
Sure. Well, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. As our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. They offer a variety of checking and saving account options that are sure to meet your banking needs, including free checking. Visit firstbank.com to find the account that's right for you. What you got, Will?
We cannot leave this discussion of the Vanderbilt offense without me asking you, in your research, did you uncover the NCAA record that was set in a game between Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt and which still stands today?
Did Tech have like 2 interception returns for touchdowns?
Was this Ashley Lee?
Ashley Lee?
This is Ashley Lee. This is my
freshman, like 90-some yards and 80-some yards.
Something like that.
This is my freshman year in college. Virginia Tech hosted Vanderbilt. Virginia Tech was very good that year. They were 9-2. Got snubbed for a bowl bid anyway. That's a different podcast.
Okay.
But Vanderbilt was bad. They were 2-9, and they came into Lane Stadium, and Ashley Lee played safety for the Hokies. Had 2 interception returns for touchdowns of 94 and 88 yards. 182 interception return yards in a game. 1983, the record still stands today. Not at the FCS level. Somebody's got like over 300 interception return yards. But at the FBS level, Ashley Lee's record still stands. And what I did not recall that I find interesting about looking at that game is that Virginia Tech won it 21-10. Hokie's good, Commodores bad. You got 2 interception returns for touchdowns of a mile long, and Tech won by 11 points. So that was an interesting aspect of that game that I'd forgotten.
That might be an actual record that's holding up today, but it's one that is broken every time I play the NCAA.
No question.
Every single time.
And I say there's
the number of pick sixes in that game.
I say there's no defense in that game.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of pick sixes. If you throw an interception, you stand no chance of getting the guy down. It's just how the game goes. Well, talking about the Vanderbilt defense now, they did make a big change here this year, Andy. Head coach Clark Lee is now going to be acting as the defensive coordinator, and that could stir things up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he was good at that when he was at Notre Dame, and I feel like this is sort of the last vestige of a coach on the hot seat is like, if I'm going down on my terms.
Sure.
Like I know how to construct a defense better. You saw Pry do it when he was first here, calling plays defensively because he wanted to have his stamp on that. So now Clark Lee is going to have his stamp on this defense, and boy, does it need it, because last year they ranked 131st in the country in total defense. And you're looking at it like, they were pretty bad at, like really bad at pass defense, so that maybe they were better in rushing defense. I think they were still like 107th or something like that. So it just was not good across the board. So, we'll see if, the head coach taking a more, concerted effort to run that side of the ball, how big of a difference that makes, what some of the personnel changes make on that side of the ball. But, I don't feel like you often see a team go from 131st nationally to like top 20. Like that would be a tremendous leap. There's going to have to be an interim leap if they make an improvement on that side. So I think it's certainly something that the Hokies can exploit out there.
Yeah, and he also brought in a new cornerbacks coach who actually was promoted from their quality control. And then he brought in a new safeties coach. He hired an assistant defensive line coach that is a quote-unquote pass rush specialist. So clearly he's making huge changes to his defense to try to improve their pass defense, whether that's by actual defense covering down the field or by generating more pressure on the quarterback. He's really, in the offseason, I think it says a little bit to your players when your head coach is more involved with you. You saw it towards the end of the Justin Fuente era. I remember when he would take control more of the how would he phrase it? I've been spending more time with the offense recently.
With the offense, or I've been spending more scout team,
right.
Yeah.
Or he would do the same thing with the defense sometimes, and it seemed like whenever he went to the defense started playing better, but then the offense would play worse.
It was like
and vice
whack-a-mole.
versa.
Yeah, it was trying to put out fires all over the place.
That's exactly right. And then there were too many fires, and I expect there's probably going to be too many fires for to put out at Vanderbilt as well. But theoretically, yes. Well, first of all, you can't get much worse than 131st out of 133 teams. So
Stanford and North Texas beg to disagree.
And Tech plays Stanford this year.
That was a point I was going to bring up.
Yeah, how about that?
They gave up more yards. Those teams gave up more yards per game last year than Colorado, which I think we all agree was a pretty bad.
That's quite a feat. Yeah. They also tried to bring in, they brought in some transfer portal guys, defensive tackle, Zaylen Wood. They technically run, I don't know if you want to, they're multi in their fronts. They've got a razor position on the edge, like Razor's Edge. Shout out to Scott Hall there.
That's right.
But
rest in peace.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't see too many impact transfers here. Like they brought in Colby Taylor at cornerback from Wyoming. He's made the Athletics freak list twice, but it's never really carried over to the field. Like he didn't grade out well for Wyoming last year in pass coverage. Opponents completed over 60% of their passes against him. There are other two cornerbacks that they'll play. Opponents completed over 70% of their passes against them last year. So it's just they like if these coaching changes work out, then these coaches aren't going to be at Vanderbilt very long because somebody's going to hire them away because this would require major improvements to turn them into what was arguably the worst defense in the country last year to something coherent and competent.
I mentioned, it's tough to make that huge jump on defense. I mean, Georgia Tech was 123rd last year in the country, total defense, and they looked all right.
They did
in that opener. They stuck it to Florida State for a little bit of that game. So, it might be one game, and I don't want to read too much into it, but I don't want to bury a team going into a season when obviously they've made a ton of changes, and first games can be weird.
And if you've got a middle linebacker with a 1998 neck brace on, you're probably going to be okay.
Georgia Tech, yeah. That was, by the way. I mean, we could take it there for 2 seconds. How great was that?
Oh, it was great.
It was great.
Football back, especially since I had it in the pick'em. So
I wasn't surprised by the result. I thought Georgia Tech's offense was going to be very hard to handle. The question was their defense, and they changed staffs. They changed defensive coaching staffs. So, they basically got Mike Elko's defense in there now. And yes, so coaching can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think I was most struck by just how non-explosive Florida State's offense looked like. Like DJU dropping back to pass, every pass was to a running back basically. It's like, do they have receivers?
They didn't try to throw the ball downfield until the third quarter.
Yeah, and when they did, it was to a running back.
Yeah.
They threw the deep ball there. So I mean, this is a team last year that had Keon Coleman, who's the other guy?
Johnny Wilson from Arizona State.
Some real threats out there, and that you just did not see that on the field. And you go, okay, is Uiagalelei going to be the guy that can carry you like Jordan Travis did previously? Maybe it's maybe they lost too much to think that, like, oh, this is the top team in the ACC coming back, and just assume that you can reload like that every single year with the transfers that they bring in.
Well, they got a bunch of transfers, and some of those guys are from Alabama. And I think some people make the mistake of, oh, he's transferred from Alabama, he's automatically going to be good. Well, sometimes you transfer from Alabama and it's because you are a good player, but there's a bunch of other good players. Sometimes you transfer from Alabama and you, as it turns out, you just weren't very good yourself.
Or it takes time.
Time.
You know, Curtis Perry came here from Alabama. He's not listed on the 2 deep, but he's also a 285-pound defensive end who might need to adjust to a different position. Like it's a new scheme, new situation. Might just take time to adjust to it.
Well, and Nick Saban's not the head coach at wherever you go at the second stop either, so that changes things a little bit. Taking it back to Vanderbilt a little bit, you mentioned to Andy that where they're at third to last in total defense. They're also fifth to last in the FBS in points allowed, 126th, and out of 130 teams, that's not going to get it done. Devin Lee and Otara are two guys that kind of struggled on the interior defensive line last year, but they did add a handful of transfer guys. Chris had mentioned some of them. They also got a guy from Purdue, a pass rusher on the edge, Kadore Sindor, who they're looking to lean on a little bit here. And then they do return their leading tackler, Langston Patterson. He's back in the middle. He made 74 stops, maybe something that they can have a little bit of veteranship in.
Yeah, you know, as far as Corday Sidnor from Purdue, he's listed as a starter. He actually didn't play very much at Purdue. Like, he was only on the field 8 snaps for that Virginia Tech Purdue game last year. So I don't know what kind of an upgrade he is. And Purdue is a team that I think Virginia Tech would have smoked after they flipped the offense. Langston Patterson is interesting. He's been a good player for them. Was a good player for him last year, but he was only on the field for maybe 350 snaps, despite, you know, a high grade and leading the team in tackles, which leads me to believe that they felt like he had some sort of weakness where he couldn't be on the field in specific situations. And my guess is probably pass coverage. But on the whole, he's a net positive for their defense. So they do have some pretty experienced linebackers, although one inexperienced one as well. Sorry if I butcher this name. Randon Faltonet, transfer from TCU, got 80 snaps as a true freshman last year. Now he's going to be starting at the star linebacker position. We don't know whether he's an upgrade. He hasn't played enough snaps. He's still a very young player. You know, so there's some new faces on this side of the ball, but for the most part, outside of Zaylen Wood on the defensive line, they're unproven new faces. It's not like they brought in like Aeneas Peoples or somebody like that, right? Or even an Antoine Powell-Ryland. It's just a bunch of guys who haven't played all that much before.
Yeah, it's 14 straight games. Vanderbilt's allowed 30 or more points. I think it's 27 of their last 29. It's not been a very good defensive program, which is sort of surprising because that's Clark Lee's specialty, and obviously personnel matters and the level of competition they go up against. I mean, last year they're playing Missouri, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, all ranked teams, all with pretty good offenses coming at you there. So it's just been a struggle. I feel like if the Hokies don't score 30 plus in this game, that, you know, they have done a poor job, because historically this has been a team that teams have scored on.
From everything that I've read about this Vanderbilt defense, the big thing they're trying to get better at this year is improving on third down, particularly. Last year, they allowed teams to convert 47% of their third down chances. And again, that's a little inflated because the first 3 games of the season, they actually contended fairly well.
Yeah. I think they're probably need to get better on every down. I suspect their third down defense was bad, partially because, yeah, they could get better there, but I expect they also faced a lot of 3rd and 2s and 3rd and 3s because they just weren't good at defense on any down.
Right.
Is my overall takeaway. So it's one of those things where you wish you're in a position where you're like, oh man, we have one weakness on defense, so let's really try to fix this. So if you're Virginia Tech, you're like, if we fix the safeties, we're going to be a much better defense this year, right? If Vanderbilt, you got to fix everything, or almost everything. Almost everything. You don't have to fix C.J. Taylor, who's a very, very good player. But other than that, there's a lot of things that have to be fixed.
CJ Taylor and Dericky Wright tied for the team lead with 2 interceptions each last season. Will, you got something for us in the fourth chair?
Yeah, I wanted to add a little context to what Andy said. In the last 3 seasons, only playing 12 games a season, Vanderbilt has given up 430 points, 432, and 434. Quick math in my head, that's an average of giving up about 35 points a game for the last 3 years. Last year, they gave it 28 in the first game, 13 in the second game, and in the last 10 games, they gave up an average of, if my math is correct, 39.7 points a game. So this is a defense that just hemorrhages.
I mean, next level stuff. Let's get into a little bit of an analysis here. We've gone through the position groups here. What can Virginia Tech exploit on Saturday?
Everything. On paper, everything.
Sure.
Okay. Now, we don't know. I don't think schematically they're going to be all that different. I think what they're looking for is better technique, better understanding of the defense, more confidence, more aggressiveness. Confidence is the thing in football. Like every football player, every college football is going to stand. Every college football player is going to stand in front of the media and say, "Oh yeah, we feel confident. We're going to have a good year." Blah blah blah. You cannot feel all that confident when you're giving up 35 points a game for the last 3 years. Like
I don't know. I've seen some of the Vanderbilt fan sites.
Yeah.
Puffing their chest out.
Really?
Going back and forth with the Virginia Tech sites. I just kind of have to laugh at all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
it's one of those things.
Put themselves out there. I'll give them that.
You might feel good about the first couple drives of the game, but like as soon as Virginia Tech scores 14 points, it's here we go again. It's into your head, right? As a football player, and that snowballs. So I think the biggest thing is you have to find a way to build the confidence level of that group. But confidence is a fragile thing. Like they're going to have to play well, and they're going to have to play well consistently early in the season. If they go out there and play against Virginia Tech like they have the last 3+ years, then it's not going to be a great year for them. So I think, man, but they weren't good against the pass, and they've got 3 cornerbacks who have allowed, I believe it was 61%, 71%, and 74% pass completion against them, I think is what I wrote in my preview. And Virginia Tech's got a really good group of wide receivers. And then Vanderbilt also couldn't stop the run, and Virginia Tech ran over everybody not named Louisville, Florida State, and NC State in the second half of last season. And it's just one of those matchups that on paper, Virginia Tech has a lot of advantages.
Yeah, on paper, but this is why they play the games. This is a season opener. Weird stuff happens in season openers, certainly early in the year. I mean, you wouldn't have looked at that Marshall matchup last year and gone, man, Virginia Tech's really going to struggle.
I did. That was the game I picked them to lose before the season started.
Okay, well,
but not for the reason they lost.
You didn't win by and sell at the end of the year. I'm just pointing that out. But I mean, you have these weird games. Start to see. I mean, nobody would have thought that Virginia Tech was going to go down and lose to ODU a couple years ago, even though I think they were only like 6-point favorites or something like that in that game. I mean, this one's, what's the line on this one? Is it
13? 13.5, depending on what you look at.
Yeah, it depends on the
Georgia Tech
site.
was 10.5-point dogs in that game. Like, we think we know going into the season what these teams are going to be, and sometimes it's just, completely different. And, even good teams sometimes take a while to get rolling. I mean, you saw that 2010 team and the start that they got off to there and eventually got things turned around. I mean, it happens where weird stuff happens. So I think, the key for Virginia Tech is like, it's not going to go perfect on Saturday, most likely. And when things don't go perfect, how are you going to react to that? And I think you saw last year's team eventually came around that they were able to handle that. That was eventually became a mature team that if something didn't go right away in some of the games, they were able to respond and, do what they did at the end of the season. Will this team be able to do that? What's the makeup of this team? And a lot of carryover from last year, but I don't think it's always a guarantee that carries over to the next season.
So, Andy, is there anything about Vanderbilt that maybe gives you pause, or like if Vanderbilt is going to give Virginia Tech a hard time, where is it? I think it starts with their quarterback, Pavia.
Yeah, I think it's Pavia. I mean, if he plays out his mind, a quarterback that plays out of his mind could affect any game. Now, I don't know if he necessarily has enough help out there, but I think he's going to make some plays because I've seen him make plays on all those highlights against, Power 4 teams like he did last year against Auburn. So that's really the only thing I look at this and I go, what's he got cooked up? What is Jerry Kill helping with this team? Because I've seen the impact firsthand that he can have on an offense here. That, it was a little bit of a struggle last year for this team, but new coaches, new attitude, new scheme, new quarterback. What can they do with those new pieces? That's sort of the unknown of this whole thing.
Definitely Pavia. I mean, I bet Virginia Tech's coaches have studied as much New Mexico State film as they have Vanderbilt film. Tech's defensive coaches.
They've had Davy Belfour mimicking him as the scout team.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Similar size guys can move around in the pocket and make plays. So I think that's kind of an interesting role for him.
What style of game are we looking at here? Is this like Georgia Tech, Florida State? Everybody ran the ball, and that game was over in 2 hours and 20 minutes or whatever it was. And
no thanks to the 2-minute warning at the end and all the timeouts.
That's the 2-minute timeout, Andy?
A 2-minute warning. I will not call it a 2-minute timeout. The last 2 minutes of that game took 15 minutes of real time. It was such a slow, like they're turning it into college basketball now at the end of games. It's horrible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was just an exception to how it's going to go. But I thought that was just such a dreadful way to end what was an exciting game and building up to an exciting moment. Was they basically just halted all the action there.
Yeah, I thought it stunk too. I think if you're Vanderbilt, you try to shorten the game. You generally want to shorten the game if you're playing against a better team. The fewer amount of plays, the less of a chance they have to use their talent advantage over you. So I do think
Georgia Tech did.
Yeah, for sure. And plus that's Georgia Tech's strength.
Yeah.
Is running the football. And Georgia Tech's strength is their quarterback, and he's the one guy that concerns you. Do they have another strength on offense to complement their quarterback? I don't know. It's so hard to say. I do think that they're a competent offensive coaching staff now. Their offensive line coach is a former offensive coordinator at Nevada back when they had Colin Kaepernick. That's what he's best known for. So you'll probably see some aspects of the pistol even this week. So I expect Tech's coaches have even gone back and watched some old Nevada film. So that the unknown is probably what concerns me more than anything else with so many new faces on the Vanderbilt offense. But at the same time, so many new faces from different backgrounds. How quickly does that come together and gel for them? Generally, it's not in week one, but you never know.
Definitely. Andy, we talked about Pry. We talked about Chris Marv. What is an impressive win in your mind? Like, what point total do they have to get to, or what do they have to hold Vanderbilt to in order to walk away feeling good?
I think I'm past the point of like impressive wins. Just win, right? Like, don't lose this type of game. That is the real, downer here is, we've seen that in past games with teams that have a little bit of hype and all of a sudden they lose a game like this that they shouldn't. I think if they pull out a close win, people won't be happy, but they'll be a lot happier than they would be if they lose this game. So, first game of the season, wherever you're going to play, I feel like you just want to win. And if you win a game, that's one more than Florida State has this week. They're feeling a lot better than Florida State would right now. So, we can talk about style points and how they can do it. And I don't know. I don't buy into all that, especially early in the year. I think you just got to get the W.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're going to assign a number to it, I would say 20-ish, with the caveat that let's say Tech starters hold them to 17 and Tech is winning the game by a lot and put in a bunch of backups at the end and then Vanderbilt scores and goes over 20. That's not a big deal. So you're kind of a moving target there, so to speak. But I think, speaking of that Florida State game, I think that Florida State game helps Virginia Tech in this game. I think the fact that game was played last week, and that's something that Brent Pry can really hammer home to his team, is like, look, everybody's talking about Florida State, even more so than they were talking about you. And then
he
they
even
came
mentioned
out
in
and
the press conference the other day. He referenced Pat McAfee putting them in the playoff. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, but you also have Florida State in the playoff. So what does that tell you? That nobody quite knows.
Exactly right. And then also you've got Brumfield, who can literally tell his defense, yo, this Pavia guy is good. Do not be sleeping on this Pavia guy just because he came from New Mexico State. He's a really good player. So I think there's some certain things like that going in Virginia Tech's favor going into this, where I think Virginia Tech is going to be ready to play. That's just my personal opinion.
Shall we make some predictions, gentlemen?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's start with Will in the fourth chair. What you got on Saturday as your final result?
So I picked a Virginia Tech win, 35-10. And I wanted to add to the discussion, you guys. First of all, I think, yes, the concerns are their quarterback and just the fact that first games can be weird. But I want to give Virginia Tech the advantage because whereas Virginia Tech's been very consistent in the coaching staff and the returning players, there's some turnover on the Vanderbilt side of the ball and in their coaching staff. So you hope if you're Virginia Tech, that'll be a positive difference. As far as what a good win looks like, I picked 35-10. That sounds good. But what does it look like? Last year they beat ODU 36-17 in the season opener, but there were some things to be concerned about there.
Yeah.
And I guess the things to look for here is it gets back to having watched that Florida State game the other night and also having caught the end of the Rutgers game from last year where Kyle Monunga, is that his name? The last touchdown he had, he went running to the left and there was literally no one there. 50 yards of just untouched. If you see some things like that in this game, you're just going to kind of cock your head and go, have the problems from last year been fixed? So what does it look like? Is it a 35-10 workman-like gain 7 yards of carry and just grind him down and get out of there with the win? Or is it, something different? So that's my take on it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. What you got, Andy?
I went 35-20. I think Virginia Tech will score points in this game. The 20 for Vanderbilt is more out of respect for Pavia and what he can do, just because I've seen him do it against a power forward team before. So 35-20, I think Tech wins it rather comfortably, though.
And that's still covering.
Still covering. That's the important part.
Exactly. Absolutely. I think I've got it 38-17. I agree with all those takes. I think it's more about how they look. Like you go back to that. That's a perfect example of the ODU game last year. Yeah, Tech won the game by 19 points, but they didn't really play well. Like Old Dominion outrushed Tech in that game by a mile. Virginia Tech's leader in yards per carry was Grant Wells. Grant Wells also had their longest run from scrimmage of the day. And he was not a running quarterback. That was the state of the Virginia Tech offense at the time. It was just not good. So the result was there, but if you actually watched the game, you knew there were still some major concerns. So what you're hoping to see for me is like more consistent linebacker play, more consistent safety play, and an offensive line that can get a little bit more of a push. Like if I can see two of those three things this week, then I think I'll walk away happy.
They say good teams win, great teams cover.
It's true.
It's true. It's true. David has them winning this one 41-13. So he's got the largest margin of victory here for Virginia Tech. And Chris, I promise I'm not copying you. I've had it typed in the script this whole time. I got Tech 38-17 is my pick. I think, again, out of respect for Pavia, he makes some plays happen. They're going to have some drives. That's just how football goes. But hopefully Virginia Tech can take care of the football. I'd love to see him score 40. I really would. And I think that's where I would take mine into the echelon of, okay, I'm impressed. If you only gave up, like if David's hit and it was 41-13, I think I'd feel a little bit more impressed than 38-17.
Well, here's the thing. Like if Tech wins 41-13 or even 38-17, I know there's some people out there fearing Vandy right now. They kind of fear the unknown. I think that's more of a lack of confidence in Virginia Tech than it is respect for Vanderbilt, in my opinion. If Virginia Tech goes out there and stomps them, a lot of those same people are just going to be like, yeah, but it was Vandy. We still haven't played anybody yet.
That's already built in.
It's already built in. Right, exactly. So there's some fear in this game, but also like if you blow them out, it doesn't necessarily mean anything in some people's eyes. Again, we'll find out the most about this team, I think, against Rutgers, although they lost their star linebacker to a torn ACL the other day, and that was really going to hurt their defense.
What's coming up on TSL this week as we get everybody prepped up for the game and then following the game as well?
Andy's got a Q&A on Thursday.
I got a practice report tonight. Kind of focus on some of those connections with Vanderbilt from the past. Got a mailbag coming Thursday and season predictions on Friday.
And Q&A for me on Friday. Brandon Patterson article. So we're into the full season content.
Here we go. What about you, Will?
I will remind everyone that Andy's preseason predictions were eerily accurate. So pay attention to that article.
Now the pressure's on. Now I got to actually put some research into this. Come on now.
Well, recap it for us. Do you remember what you picked last year that particularly stood out as?
It was just the second half of the season, like the tenor of. I picked all the games correctly, and the tenor of every description basically played out how it did. So blind squirrel finds a nut. It works out every now and then.
The man follows the team very closely. He is a professional sports writer. He doesn't have the emotional investment that some of us do.
Very true.
You know, so I went back and read that article, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. I wouldn't have written that, but it's pretty good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, who's going to Nashville? Will's going.
Yep, taking a big crew.
Are you going, Chris?
Nah.
Chris is staying. But
I don't know. I wouldn't get any work done if I went to Nashville.
That's a very adult decision that you have made.
It's kind of depressing, but
Yeah,
Andy will
we're
be
heading
down
out
there.
Thursday.
I'm also heading out Thursday as well.
Hey,
What you got, Will?
when you do the buy or sell that we're getting ready to record right after this, this will not be part of the proceedings, but buy or sell who will have the most fans there. Seriously.
I'd buy Virginia Tech will have more fans.
This is just anecdotal, but they were actually talking about it on the message board this morning. There are a lot of people going. And for my group to take, my college group to take 15 people to a road game, I don't remember the last time we did that. So that's, now Nashville is a destination city.
Yes.
A place that a lot of Hokies haven't been, particularly to see a football game. So that will play into it. So throw that one in there at the end and see what people say.
I thought we were going to do buy or sell. How many drinks will Gio have on his 21st birthday the night before the game?
Depends if the Hokies win or lose. Actually, it probably doesn't.
no, it's definitely not going to.
The mood will just be different. It'll either be celebratory or out of depression.
Go hard or go home. That's how you got to do it on the 21st.
Looking forward to it. Well, it's going to be fun. We appreciate everyone checking out episode 370 of the Tech Sideline podcast. As always, today's show, of course, brought to us by First Bank and Trust Company, also brought to us by the Hokie Way. For Nick Brown behind the scenes, for Will Stewart, for Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. Let's go Hokies on Saturday.